HallowMace.
There have been proven cases of people stepping outside the role that they should play. And once you do that, you invite certain problems. I think that I don't know whether it was in this program or another program. I had advocated, even when I was chairman of the House Committee on Army, that even though the military has had to pull out men that are performing duties on the streets, duties which should be performed by the police, civil defense, or other paramilitary forces. But we should make efforts to withdraw the military as much as possible from direct contact with the other paramilitary forces, because over the years we've witnessed a problem that before you will never hear of a military man on the street collecting money from drivers or from anybody, but those standards are dropping, and the dropping of those standards is not good for the military, it's not good for the country. And I think that even though it has become necessary to have military on the streets, I do advocate that military should not be part of task forces operating with the paramilitary agencies, because increasingly military people on the street, military men on the street, are imbibing the unethical behaviors and attitudes of the other agencies, bringing disrepute to the military and making people to take the military for granted. In those days, quite as early as 2011, people will say they prefer to have soldiers in a place. Whenever they saw soldiers coming, people will run away. But now that is changing. People are no longer getting afraid of the military, and it's not good. What we are talking about is really whether people can have enough food to eat, one. Number two, whether they will be able to send their children to school, and if they are sick, whether they will have access to hospitals and be able to buy the medicines that they need. So those are the basic things that you are talking when you are talking about the economy. And indeed, it's a very serious problem, because over the last, especially in the last 8 years, farmers have been on. That is a basic thing. I start from that perspective because majority of people in Nigeria are employed in the agricultural sector. They are largely peasant farming, either raising a few livestock or having farms, and for which they used to feed themselves and their families, and they use the excess to sell in the market to pay pay hospital bills, to send their children to school. Now, what has happened, and that is a major thing that we are not looking at, is that if you look at current statistics, I just read somewhere yesterday and I was astonished that Niger Republic actually produces quite substantial, maybe more beans than Nigeria. It's an arid region. If people are talking about scarcity of tomatoes today, and the tomatoes that you are talking about and the onions that you are talking about, much of it has been in the previously was being farmed in parts of the north. Many of the areas, people have been driven away. They can no longer live there. People are complaining that yams today, if you go to market, people are no longer able to buy yams. They have to slice them into pieces to buy. Why not? One of the biggest baskets of yams in the country is the Benue Troy. That is parts of, Benue State and parts of Taraba State. Most of those areas have been overrun by bandits masquerading in the name of headers or so. If you go to Kaduna State, a very significant percentage of the maize that is found in Nigeria comes from southern Kaduna, parts of Kaduna, places like Saminaka and Co. Now, people can no longer farm in those places. If you go to Plateau State, much of the potatoes that you eat in the country, Irish potato, come from Bokos, Mango in Plateau State. The people can no longer farm. Even on the plateau, top of the plateau, places like Bassa local government, places like Jos North Riyom, we used to have large quantity of vegetables that were sent to all parts of the country. In fact, at a point, when ShopRite started in Nigeria, I understand that it was buying 10 million naira worth of Irish potato from Jos. Now the people have been displaced. They are living in camps. So where will you not expect hunger in the land? If you even check the statistics of hunger, it is said that 87% of the hunger problem in Nigeria is in northern Nigeria. That is where the problem is. And this problem of insecurity has gone down to the south, gone down to, including the so-called headers problem. It's gone down to even places like Delta State. You have that challenge there. You have that challenge in Edo State. And if you go to Kogi State, understand the whole local government today, people are being displaced. Now, why will you not expect hunger in the land? That is at one level. Now, the second level, which is also related, is that it's not about the problems that we have. People live on hope, generally. And if you give people hope, they can innovate what they can use to live their lives. But it does not appear that there's a program, there's a plan that can take us out of the woods. Increasing, and if you notice, around Abuja and most urban centers, there's massive migration from the rural areas. Slums, even in Abuja, are developing all over the outskirts of Abuja. People are running from the rural areas to come into cities. Now, those places where people are coming into will become hotbeds of crime and criminality, further increasing the problems of the economy. And then if you go to the issue that is very popular among us, the oil. I listened to someone, a white man, an analyst who was speaking from the US, and the analysis is that until we begin to produce and sell up to 5 million barrels per day, we're not likely going to get out of the economic situation that we have. Mind you, part of the problems that we have is that we have forward sold the oil and used up the money. So if you have further dip in the production, it means that you are going to further increase the loan, the money that we collected for oil that we might be unable to supply. Challenge of Nigeria is the leadership. And the leadership problem has flowed down right to the lowest category of persons in the country. What do I mean? First, there's dishonesty at every level. We are not. If you listen to the debate in the Senate about the ranching, so-called ranching, and so forth, see that there were a lot of insincerity. What do I mean by a lot of insincerity? According to President Muhammadu Buhari, only 2% of the arable land, cultivatable land in northern Nigeria has been cultivated. That means that we have over 97% of the arable good land that needs to be cultivated that should be cultivated. So where are we having farmers herders clash if there's so much land? Number two, if you look at related to this point, the insincerity, if you look at the statistics of Nigeria's ratio of cattle, Nigeria is one of the lowest producers of cattle and cattle related products in the world. In fact, so low that in terms of per capita ratio, Ghana has more cattle than Nigeria, and many of the surrounding. Why is it that we have so much land, so few cattle, we are fighting over grazing? The issue is that if you also watch debates at the National Assembly, the debates follow. Someone will stand up and introduce himself. He will call the name of his ethnic group. For instance, Rima Shawulu Kwewum, a Kuteb man from Taraba State.
For you, it's not necessary.
No, psychology of that is that the loyalty is to the ethnic group,
not to the Nigerian.
Not to the Nigerian state. If you look at even the debate, which I talked about the insincerity, the people who are talking about allowing cattle to graze are not even looking at the fact that the cattle that are grazing are not, the complaint is not that they are grazing on grass. The complaint is that they are going to cut down crops. Like if you saw pictures from Plateau State, pictures from Taraba State, pictures from all over the country, these cattle go into farmlands to destroy farmlands. They leave the grass to destroy farmlands. And then someone will say, so the issue is the insincerity. Now, come to think of it, if you look at the history of cattle across the country, across the world, there is no community, there is no tribe that did not have cattle. All tribes had people who were rearing cattle, people who are farming, including the Fulani. The Fulani have farmers who are farming other crops. They have people who are, so that rearing cattle is not, it does not belong to one group alone. Even in the United Kingdom, they had that problem. They had cattle going to London, destroying the streets of London, dating every place. They had to make legislation. There was a legislation someone was telling me about called the Enclosures Act. And what did it do? Part of it was to stop people from allowing free range of cattle, of animals, because free range of animals were dating the city, they were creating environmental problems, as well as destroying other people's products. I understand that one of the regulations at that time was that if a cattle strayed into somebody's enclosure, it became that person's property. And we had rules, and we have rules that do exist that we are not following. I remember a meeting we had with the former President Muhammadu Buhari at the government house in Jalingo when there was a problem between cattle, so-called cattle rearers, and the late Akuka of Bukari stood up there and told the president, we have a regulation, and me, I'm old enough at 63. I remember that time. Before cattle move from one location to another, they needed the permission of the authorities where they were moving into. And they normally had to take count. How many people are coming? How many cattle are coming with you? So that you don't come back tomorrow and say your cattle were stolen. Even in nearby Cameroon, that still does apply. So, question today, people will say that 200 cows were roasted or taken from a location. How many cows went there in the first place? There is no statistics. Nobody knows. So, and then it could well be people who are trying to foment trouble that are trying to do this. So if we just go back to obey our regulation, leave out our insincerity, allow people to do their farming, allow people to do what they needed to do, and if any person wants to, which is why one of the reasons why I don't actually support this so-called ranching thing that people are talking about, because if you are talking about ranching, government is going to invest. Government has to equally invest money on other forms of agriculture. The reason is that the Fulani man or the Birom man, there was a time Birom people were some of the biggest cattle owners on the Jos Plateau. If they buy a land 100 by 100, keep their cattle there. The land becomes their own. Nobody will go there. They can grow the grass there and keep the cattle there. Cattle moving from one location to another. That is the responsibility of the local government, and which is why I actually love and what President Tinubu is doing about the local governments, and I pray that the Supreme Court agrees with my own interpretation of the Constitution, that the local governments, as presently enshrined in the Constitution, should be self-sustaining entities, a tier of government as guaranteed by the Constitution. The reason is that for any security to work, the local governments must work. That is where you have the basic meetings. That is why the chiefs and the local government officials and the councillors need to know whoever comes into the local government. But presently, in most of the states, local governments are just a department of the governor's offices. And because of that, the local governments only pay salary. In fact, in most of the states, the salaries are paid by a so-called bureau for local governments. So the security meetings are not being held. The chiefs are not the chiefs and the village heads who should be the first responders to the presence of strangers. I don't have the resources. And let me tell you something that you don't know, that you may not know. In almost all local governments, the number of policemen that are present is so low. So low. In some places, you don't have up to 50 policemen in a local government. So how do you, and that is where the basic problem is. I have advocated that a country like Nigeria should have at least 2 million policemen. Let's do small maths. If there are 100 or 200 policemen in each of the 774 local government areas, they can cover as many wards as possible. They will be able to respond to something is happening here. They can go. But now we don't have. The local governments are becoming like ungoverned spaces. I think the state policing is for now is absolute rubbish. Okay. Let me say so that we don't forget. Okay. Let me say that it's absolute rubbish for me because state governments are unable to pay salary. They are saying they can't pay more than 30,000 naira salary. How can they now take for a state, the smallest state, say Bayelsa State? We need at least 200 to 300 or 500 policemen in every local government. Multiply that by the 13 that they have. You are talking about maybe 4,000 to 5,000 policemen. Bayelsa has less than 3,000 workers, I think. I'm guessing, I don't know. Now you add another 5,000 or 6,000 to, because if you just employ 20 policemen, state police in a local government area, you are just employed political talks. You need to have 500 in every local government, and the states don't have capacity to pay. They say, the governors say that themselves. We have We've had people that are visionless, greedy, who take money from the country, drop them the money in European banks, and they don't have access to much of the money and the properties they leave in the European banks again. Because once they die, the money is lost. That is one. Number two, because of lack of vision. You see, we started about the same time with countries like a little bit later than countries like India and some of the countries that we started with. They are far ahead of us. Look at Brazil, for instance. You know, we're celebrating buying some jets that are going to help us fight Boko Haram, which President Muhammadu Buhari took 1 billion naira from the excess crude account to buy. Do you know that those jets are Embraer jets from Brazil? Do you know we are talking about buying tractors from India? Do you know that even China, that is the top workshop of the world today, about 40 years ago was one of the poorest countries in the world? But because certain things took place in China, we had visionary leaders. Secondly, we had morality. They had something they believed in. They believed in China. They believed in being one another's keeper. The way they handle them, their rule, you may not like it. But a situation does exist in China where if you steal government property, you will be executed. Actually, ask a child today in Nigeria, ask a school child today in Nigeria, ask him the vision for the country, whether he will have anything. That is a problem. Number one, if you go, and that lack of vision and the inordinate ambition to get wealth has permeated down to the lowest level. The former ASU president, Dr. Sule Kano, told me once, he said he almost cried. He finished lecturing some students and he was leaving the campus. So he was walking. He was behind some of his students. And the students were saying that they were waiting for opportunity to get into government so that they will steal and buy cars and do this and do this. Why is it that way? Because we have given the impression that every person, anyone that has money and wealth in this country has stolen the money or done something wrong. So people, including the young people coming behind us, believe that you have to cheat someone, you have to do something wrong before you make money. So these things that we have created, these problems that we have created for ourselves, until we unlearn them, and it can only be unlearned from the top. It can only start from the top. It can't start from the bottom. There was a time, a place like Japan, there was a time Japan came to Africa and took containers and containers of topsoil to go and do farming. They took topsoil from here. Nigeria is one of the richest places on the surface of the earth. Some of the rarest minerals in the world are found in Nigeria. And what is happening? Because people think that it's easier to have it for myself and my family. The collective good is lost. Otherwise, the gold alone that we have can sustain the country. Most Fulani have lost their cattle. The cattle that you have, that they are rearing, many of them are working as laborers to big people in town, whether they are military men or they are top civil servants or top businessmen. What he said is a fact, which is why you see the Fulani people, guys who are holding AK-47, don't have the money to buy AK-47. There are people in the town, the owners of these cows, who buy. Many of them are in government. They are in government. They are in all the agencies in government. They are the ones that buy these guns for these Fulani and tell them to go and do whatever they need to do. And I have argued before that these Fulani boys in the bush, They need education like every other person. They want to live good life like every. They need to go to school. They need to enter into the mainstream economy. But for our selfish elites, it's better to keep them there, to keep their cows, which they now sell during festivities, to government agencies or even agencies that they are part of the management, so that they make the big bucks. Nigeria does not have punishment for wrong.
But why is that our laws?
Who obeys the laws in the country? I'm sure that if I follow you, you will disobey traffic rules.
No, I will not.
Cousin.
Cousin, I will not. I point to you, I will not.
See, as basic as standing in a queue, as basic as respecting people's rights on the road, we don't do in Nigeria. If you go to even a place like Nigeria, let me mention Nigeria again, people obey traffic rules. A law is as good as it can be enforced. A law that cannot be enforced is like it does not exist. Now, let me make one point very clear. Everywhere in the world, all through history, that human societies have developed and advanced, it is through the instrumentality of government, of governance. Indeed, for man to transit from where we had the survival of the fittest, the animal kingdom and so forth, a form of governance had to be evolved that allowed for only certain people to hold arms to use on behalf of all the other people. We must get government right in Nigeria. If we don't get government right in Nigeria, we will not have an end to insecurity. Some of the nonsense that, sorry, I use these phrases, you forgive me for them. Some of the things that people talk about, economy cannot develop without government. The United States has at a point, 53% of all employment in the United States were done by small businesses. And these small businesses were funded by government. Government government provided funding for financial institutions, and government stood as security for small business people with ideas to go and pick this money to do their businesses. Some of the big corporations that later evolved and became worldwide started in garages, supported by government. So sometimes you hear people talk about government has no business in business, it's rubbish. Government is the engine of growth anywhere in the world. Several state governors, I understand, collected money, some 2 billion, some 6 billion from the federal government to create where cattle will graze. And nothing has happened to them. AFCC has not gone after them. Nobody knows what is happening. I think that inquiry needs to be reopened. Which state governors collected those monies and where did they put the money? Because that's why I said government everywhere in the world, all through history, has been the engine of growth, the engine of growth of the economy. Even China that people are talking about, most of the Chinese big companies are government backed. Not just government backed, government has strong ownership in them, including the companies that are doing mining in Nigeria, including companies that are doing road construction in Nigeria. So for someone to come and say that government has no business, government has business in making business to function. Government has business in ensuring that things take off, because that is the problem that we are. And let's be very careful. Let's be very careful. People don't think that colonization is possible again, but colonization is possible again. Let me tell you one thing. If they bring some aeroplanes to Abuja here now, and said they want to take people to go out to China to become laborers or slaves there, people will bribe to enter those aeroplanes. Already pictures are emerging from the northwest of children looking like the famine-stricken people of Ethiopia. of those days. The hunger, I did a motion before that there will be hunger last year and this year before I left the house.
You're like a prophet.
No, that was it was plain to see that farmers, where people were producing, farmers were running away. See, those areas around Borno, let's start from Borno. You know, a lot of the onions that we used to consume in Nigeria used to come from Borno. Boko Haram has driven them out. So where is the onion? The beans, we had a lot of beans coming from Zamfara, Sokoto, and Kebbi. Now the farmers are no longer farming. So where are you going to get the beans?
HallowMace, parliamentary advocacy and journalism redefined.